Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group. This time we have a roundtable. She serves, she matters with She Voices. Coalition partner Sistah Soldier. May is Mental Health Awareness and Military Caregiver Month. Today is Saturday, May 14th, 2022. You just heard our host earlier today, Kelley, and I'm the co-host, Sean Claiborne. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line today, Miss Wanda Petty. She is a U.S. Army veteran, president, CEO of SheVet Inspire, and she is also known as Sistah Soldier. How you doing?
Hey there, I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Now, we've been talking a lot about mental health today and also some other topics we've talked about today, but it all seems to come back to health and well-being. So you want to talk about some ways to develop good mental health. Now tell us to me, Sistah Soldier, in your life, when did you start focusing on mental health?
Oh, well, first, usually it starts with self. So there was a period in my life where I needed to focus on my well-being, and it took a lot. It took everything that I had. I had to really focus on energy of prayer and just finding ways to be able to take care of myself in the midst of the turbulence that I was experiencing. So I would say that that's more likely happened to me in the early 90s when I had to really dig in and learn how to do that.
And then, so what does mental health mean to you?
Well, it could mean the difference between sanity and not being, having sanity or life or death. It's really important because there were times that I didn't know how I was going to handle a certain situation, and I had to step back and really look in depth on what was happening, seek counseling. I had to, our community, I'm going to say the Black community, we are not always privy or wanting to know or used to, hearing, go and talk to someone for counseling, seeking outside help. And so that at that time, it was a taboo to get any type of help from a counselor. And so I had to be willing to go against that grain and think more about taking care of myself so that I could be available to take care of my kids.
Is there like a rock bottom element to it where like you feel like you just get to the point where you just can't keep doing what you're doing? You can't keep doing the same old? You're getting like sick and tired of being sick and tired, as they say?
Yeah. That usually happens when we're burnt out from trying to please others, when we can't please someone else or is working overtime, not enough sleep, or not facing reality, facing the things that may be happening that we are hoping that they're not going in a certain direction. We have no plan for if things turn in a direction that we was hoping that it wouldn't. And oftentimes that causes stress. And so in those type of moments, a person can find themselves in a corner, quote unquote, and wondering what next, especially if there's not someone that they could trust that is close by, that they feel they can confide in, or a good friend or family member to help them get out of the situation. And we normally need someone that is not in the boat with us, quote unquote, that can see things from a different perspective, a more clear perspective, to give us the insight we need in order to maneuver out of it.
So what did you learn when you went through that journey to try to get help for yourself and also to kind of focus on that mental health aspect? What did you learn in the process?
So I learned the most valuable thing is that I'm for one, I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for my health, and if I have plans and that I intend to achieve in the future or want it to be here, for longevity to raise my kids, I think that was the thing that really kept me grounded, was that I didn't want to leave them in a state of mind that, well, what happened to mama, So keeping that in my foresight, I had to consider how am I going to get myself out of this, and what was important to me. So I had to think about what could I do, and realize that I didn't have to be in that situation. That there were people that have experienced that before myself, and how did they get out of it? So I started researching. I started reading books. I started journaling. Started taking time to myself to spend time alone, to get quality time for myself, to hear from God, reading my Bible, praying. I was doing it all, you know. So it's work. It's definitely work, but it can be done because most people who have experienced that, they put work in, and that's why they're still here.
I think that's really important what you just said, the work, because it's so easy. People don't realize, Wiseman once said, it's so easy to die. All you got to do is just stop. That's all you got to do is just stop. But to live takes work. It takes effort.
Yeah, most definitely.
So what is your process for keeping your mind right?
So my process is a daily activity. It's a daily practice, and that is just sitting still. First, I read my word. You know, I read something of inspiration that is going to fill my cup, that is going to actually contradict the negative thoughts that I may have from the environment or the news or whatever, looking towards gratitude. And then I sit quietly and I meditate on what I read, which is, in most cases, it may be my Bible or a book that is inspirationally written. And I'll sit for maybe 15 minutes and just sit quietly and allow my mind to just be silent so that I could get my thoughts. It causes me to be more aware. And then I take that extra time. And when I'm working and I notice that I may not have taken a break, because it's easy when you work from home to be in that closed environment where you're in the office of, you know, your room by yourself, or you have no one to really talk to, children, you know, moving them out of the way or whatever. But being in that space of constantly working, I have to time myself and remind myself to eat. I have to remind myself to drink water. I have to remind myself to get up and go and walk outside the beach for a minute. You know, I'm really grateful for that, because I'm like 15 minutes away, so I can take the time to go and get that cool breeze on my face and really think and have that serene moment. You know, so I take a lot of time to reflect and to allow myself to process what's happening with me.
Before I get my next question, though, maybe you made me think of something that I always could mention. You talked about the beach and walking on the beach. How important is the environment? Then what do you say to those people that they're maybe in an environment where they may not realize that might be the problem?
Yeah. So for someone who is in an environment, it's all type of environments. You could be in a hostile environment, just being around other people. You know, the bodily language, the comments that they make, the mental abuse, and things of that nature, and all of that begins to wear and tear on the mind, and eventually it's going to hit the body, because once we get it in our mind, it's our subconscious that starts to hold on to that, and then it responds to it. So that means there's a point that it gets overwhelmed with the negative environment, and then it wants to shut down. So we have to be able to recognize when we no longer want to eat, we no longer want to get out of bed, but want to communicate with people, and check the environment. If we're around people who are constantly saying negative words and going against the grain, we know the sky is blue, the sun is shining, and they're saying no, it's dark and muggy, then that's an opposition, a contrast of what we actually are seeing. And even if we don't see it, it may be in our heart that we feel like the sun is shining. There were days that I would feel, because it was raining, it would take me back to the experiences that I had as as an individual survivor of domestic violence, and it would immediately take me back there. And my husband shared with me one day, he said, carry your sunshine on the inside of you. And when he said that, something shifted to whereas it no longer have to be sunny outside for me to know that the sun is on the inside of me and that I can get through that moment. That was a thing of the past, you know. And now I'm in a new, healthy relationship and a beautiful marriage, and the days are sunny and it's a positive environment. So I have to remind myself that that was then and this is now. So the environment does matter. It really does.
And then you touch on, like, when you talk about this, you talk about the physical versus the mental. Like, how do you think it starts in the mind first, and then it triggers into the physical, or does it start in the physical first and then that transforms the mind, or is it back and forth?
I think it starts in the mind first, because unless we've been physically injured, okay, but it starts in the mind. We even have the power within our mind to transform the way we feel internally by our thoughts. So our thoughts are very, very powerful, you know, and it's the words that we say, the words that we hear. We are calling things that be not as though they were. So when we speak, we have to be careful of the words that we speak about our body. I remember my mother had a stroke, and when she would speak about it, she would always say, my stroke. I said, that's not your stroke. You had an experience. So you can't just continue to claim the stroke and all of its infirmities. You have to change the way we talk and the way we think, and then everything else will shift around it, because we form not only our future, but we form things in our mind based upon the words that we speak and the things that we think. So the subconscious mind is constantly working. If we're putting things out there and thinking certain thoughts, it doesn't know the difference. So it's going to gravitate to the things that are negative, which will automatically sometimes make you feel, or make a person feel like they are feeling that way. So when I may say something sometimes, there has been times that I've said it, I didn't feel like that until I opened my mouth and said it. And then immediately I started feeling sleepy. Whatever it was, I may have said, I'm not sleepy, or something of that nature I would say about my behavior. And the next thing I knew, it would happen, because I've already set the tone for it.
Well, a lot of doctors on our shows kind of mentioned the same thing. They talked about it in a different way. They're saying how oftentimes your body and even your mind, to a degree, controlling your mind and controlling your body, telling yourself things that aren't necessarily what you want to tell yourself, but because your body can't tell the difference. Part of, even when you have PTSD, your body is stuck in that kind of moment.
Yeah.
Of the trauma.
Yeah.
So your body's reacting as if you're there, all back there again, but in reality, you're not even there.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the times that we have to put practices in place. So when we know that there's that subconscious mind that keeps wanting to take us to an area that we are not actually in, or an experience that we are not currently experiencing, we have to have things in place to perhaps breathe and remind ourselves, like, okay, what's happening around me right now? Who am I literally talking to? Am I talking to that person that made me feel that way 10 years ago, or is this someone differently? Did they say something that triggered me? And if so, how can I stop being triggered by that conversation? And journaling with it will allow the emotion. So a lot of times we can't distinguish the difference between a thought and an emotion. And the emotions are something that we feel in our body, but our thought is what we are trained in our mind with. So if we can distinguish the difference between the two, then now we can kind of, like, when we feel an emotion, we can decide that, okay, that's just that's a artificial feeling that I don't need to, quote unquote, jump on the train and ride it out. I can make a choice. I can decide or whether or not I had to do this the other day. I was feeling kind of like a blue feeling came over me for no reason, and I had to back, like, why am I feeling like that? Then when I started thinking about it, I thought about what took place in that day. Then I was able to pinpoint what it was. Once I was able to pinpoint it, then I had to come to the reality that it wasn't what I thought it was, that was an old conversation coming up that was making me feel that way. And I just started breathing. I took several deep breaths and allowed that emotion to go through my body, and then I was okay.
Wow. Now, do you feel in your life when you actually started getting more control of your mental health and also your physical health, that is when you started helping others through She Voices and things like that?
Yes, there was no other way I could do it outside of that. I had the deepest desire to help people as much as I could, and I did, but it wasn't to the capacity that I am now. And I realized in the process that I had to take care of me first. So there was a point of time where I had to step back and start really thinking about what am I doing, how am I taking care of myself before I go and take care of others, Mm-hmm. And so doing that now, I have a solid foundation. I have practices in place that I know that in perimeters, boundaries, that's a biggie right there. We have to put boundaries around ourselves in order to protect our own mental health, Mm-hmm.
And I think that you touched on and mentioned it earlier, but I want to go back to that topic of the process, because the thing is that if you don't have a process in place, it's very difficult to accomplish anything. I mean, the military teaches you a process. There's a process to how you clean your weapons. There's a process to how we used to shine our boots. There's a process to how you stand in the child line. There's a process how you do everything. So if you don't have the processes in place, you have to find that process that can help you stay on top of everything. It's not always, sometimes we want to look towards a product or look towards a thing or some kind of event to try to make it better, or someone to come through the doors, a white knight in shining armor or whatever, or a princess to come from the sky. No, it's usually some kind of process you got to develop your behaviors and your actions in that process that's going to help you get to where you want to be.
Yes, most definitely. And that's when we have to know ourselves. We also have to know ourselves, but having some practices in place that we start to implement to be able to change those thoughts that we are feeling, the emotions that are following behind it. And if those things don't work, then we definitely need to seek counsel. We need to find a counselor or a coach to be able to walk us through that so that we can have it identified and have someone else show us something that we are not familiar with that can help us get out of the rut that we may find ourselves in. It is definitely a process, and I suggest that I had to decide what practices work for me. So exercising, I had to start exercising, and I realized that if I don't exercise, my body starts to feel a certain way. I don't have the same adrenaline that flows throughout the day, energy. I had to start eating foods with omega-3s that gave me healthy fats, and so that my brain would operate at its peak, and drink a lot of water. We ignore water these days, So practices in place, simple things that we know to do but we don't do, and things that are not costly, that it just takes the effort to do them, that we can put in place and start noticing a difference in our behavior, in our thought process, and reading books. I cannot stress that enough, that if we read self-help books that of someone who has gone through a certain situation that pulled them out of it, that a lot of times seeing it from someone else's point of view can help.
Sister Soldier, we appreciate your time and all the things you're doing for the community and all the things you're doing for veterans, and also the type of work you're doing, bringing people, entrepreneurs up, new entrepreneurs in the media field. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.